Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into a legal riddle straight from the Supreme Court of the Philippines that is, well, it's completely counterintuitive. It really forces us to look under the hood at how laws are actually written and how the precise, literal wording of a statute can lead to some wildly unexpected outcomes. Ready? Let's just get right into it.
Think about this for a second. How is it possible that a guy convicted of two separate, horrific crimes actually walks away with a significantly lighter penalty than if he'd just been convicted of one single, complex crime? It sounds like broken math, right? But in the realm of criminal law, the math is entirely driven by language, precise definitions, and legislative history.
All right, Section 1, the facts of the case, and what happened on February 2nd, 2013. To crack this puzzle, we've got to start with the cold hard facts established in the trial court. It's around 5:30 in the morning. The accused, Glenn Barrera, breaks into a house by removing a window jalousie. He snatches a DVD player and a TV. But tragically, he doesn't stop there. He heads upstairs and commits an absolutely horrific assault on a sleeping 7-year-old girl. Now, legally speaking, the court records establish that this assault involved the use of his tongue, rather than traditional penile penetration. And I need you to hold on to that specific detail because it is literally the linchpin of this entire case.
So, the child's shouts wake the parents, and Barrera is caught trying to flee the compound. The legal machinery kicks in. The trial court looks at what happened. There was a robbery, and there was a rape. Because of that, they charge and convict him of the special, complex crime of robbery with rape. Under the Philippine Revised Penal Code, this specific charge carries a devastating penalty, as it absolutely should given the inherent atrocity. They sentence him to reclusion perpetua, basically life in prison without parole. Case closed, right? Well, not quite.
Which brings us to Section 2, Rape versus Sexual Assault.
When Barrera appeals to the Supreme Court, the justices do something very specific. They meticulously examine the exact wording of the law. They aren't questioning the facts of the night, they're looking at how the law classifies those facts. And they spot a crucial legal divide. The Revised Penal Code, which was updated by the 1997 anti-rape law, draws a very strict line. It separates traditional rape, committed through carnal knowledge, meaning penile penetration, from what it classifies as sexual assault, which covers inserting objects, instruments, or the tongue into an orifice. So looking at the facts of Barrera's case, his crime clearly fell into that second bucket, sexual assault, not carnal knowledge. Now this distinction, it is absolutely crucial. Why? Because courts are bound by a foundational principle, in dubio pro reo. In plain English, if a criminal law is ambiguous or confusing, the tie always goes to the defendant. The Supreme Court had to ask themselves a really tough question. When lawmakers wrote the older 1993 law, the one with the massive penalty for robbery with rape, did they intend for the word rape to include this newer 1997 definition of sexual assault? Or were they strictly talking about traditional carnal knowledge?
So we head into Section 3, deciphering the legislative intent.
To figure this out, the court essentially had to play historical detective. They dug right into the fiery congressional debates from 1997 to find the true, original intent of the lawmakers who drafted the anti-rape law. Here's how it went down. The Senate was pushing incredibly hard to expand the definition of rape to cover any violation of a person's bodily autonomy. Senator Cossetang, quoting straight from the legislative record here, passionately argued that rape is fundamentally about power and non-consent, regardless of the biological mechanics. The Senate wanted all of these acts to just be called rape because the trauma to the victim is profound either way.
But on the flip side, the House of Representatives pushed back. They wanted to stick to the traditional definition. Chairman Sachter pointed out that the extremely severe death penalty tied to traditional rape was deeply rooted in the potential for unwanted procreation, the fear of introducing, as he put it, an outsider to the family. The House argued it just wasn't fair to punish object rape or sexual assault with the exact same ultimate gravity, reclusion perpetua to death, as carnal knowledge.
And honestly, this is a perfect illustration of how laws actually get made. Compromise. To get the bill passed, they met in the middle. They agreed to expand the big umbrella definition of rape to include both carnal knowledge and sexual assault. But, and here's the kicker, as a concession to the House, they deliberately kept the penalties separate. Carnal knowledge kept the most severe punishments, while the newly classified sexual assault was assigned distinctly lighter penalties.
Let's see how this plays out in Section 4. 2 crimes, lighter penalty.
Okay, let's apply all that explicit legislative history right back to Glenn Barrera. This is how the court resolved our initial paradox.
The Supreme Court majority ruled that because the specific complex crime of robbery with rape was drafted in 1993 with only traditional carnal knowledge in mind, it simply couldn't automatically absorb the newly defined, lesser penalized sexual assault. If they applied the absolute harshest penalty to an act that lawmakers explicitly said should be punished less severely, they'd be violating that rule of interpreting ambiguous laws in favor of the accused. So they couldn't charge Barrera with the single, heavy crime of robbery with rape. They had to split it into two entirely separate crimes, robbery and sexual assault. And here is where the math just gets wild. By breaking the charges apart, the maximum penalty for the robbery was 7 years and 4 months. The maximum for the sexual assault, 17 years and 4 months. Added together, the absolute maximum time in prison mathematically drops to 24 years and 8 months, so about 24.6 years. That is a staggering difference from an inescapable life sentence of reclusión perpetua without parole. 2 crimes literally resulted in less time than 1.
But wait, there's more. Section 5, the concurring opinion twist.
Just when you think the puzzle is neatly solved by legislative history, Justice Kagiuoa drops a brilliant alternate perspective in his concurring and dissenting opinion. He completely reframes the case. He actually agreed that the sentence should be lowered and split into 2 crimes, but he boldly argued that the majority's deep dive into those 1997 Senate debates was entirely obiter dicta. That's a legal term meaning it was an incidental opinion, totally unnecessary to decide this specific case. He was essentially saying, hey, you guys are doing way too much work analyzing the definition of rape when you should just be looking at the definition of the robbery.
See, he pointed out on massive mechanical flaw right at step 1 of the prosecution. The special complex crime of robbery with rape explicitly requires that the robbery itself is committed using violence against or intimidation of persons. But look back at the facts. Barrera got into the house by breaking a window. Under Filipino law, that is categorized as force upon things, not violence against persons. So because he used force upon things, that special complex crime of robbery with rape never applied from the absolute start.
In Kaguya's view, the mechanical definition of the robbery itself instantly demanded that the accused face 2 separate charges. Strip away the violence against persons, and the complex crime just evaporates. So that whole intense, emotional debate over the anti-rape law's history, completely secondary. The answer to the puzzle was literally hiding in plain sight, right there in the broken window.
As we wrap up this explainer, we're left wrestling with a really profound tension. We obviously want our legal system to be precise, right? To strictly follow the legislative text and protect the accused from government overreach. But when rigorous statutory construction, whether that's parsing through 1997 congressional debates or analyzing the difference between breaking a window and threatening a person, leads to a mathematically lighter sentence for such a truly horrific act, is the true spirit of justice actually being served? It's a tough one to answer. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.